the other direction.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being with us to do our Senate Democrat end of the session roundup and highlights. I think this was one of the most productive and successful sessions that I can ever remember, getting a budget done on time and balanced with favorable reviews from, as reported in Bloomberg News, from several rating services and financial investment firms that see Connecticut moving in a positive direction because of the budget decisions that we made. The passage of major landmark legislation like the increase in the minimum wage with indexing in the future to provide a stable base and predictability in that, and of course the passage of paid family and medical leave, a major hallmark piece of legislation that many of us had been advocating for years. So we have a number of members of our caucus here to talk about various aspects of legislation that we passed in this year, and I'd want to kick it off by introducing our great majority leader, Senator Bob Duff.
Thank you, Senator Looney, and thank you for all your good work. We would not be standing here today if it weren't for your careful stewardship of a lot of legislation that was proposed back in January and that made it through the final days of the legislative session. So we want to thank our leader, of course, for all his good work. I also want to thank our members. We have a number of new members this year who came to the Senate brand new, some of whom came from the House, some just came from being locally elected. And we have just so much great talent here in the Senate Democratic Caucus that we're able to kind of come in, roll their sleeves up, hit the ground running, and never once seem like this was their first session. So they really worked very, very hard and put forward a number of initiatives and passed a number of initiatives that had, many of which had been worked on over many years that had never passed, but this year, because of their great work, we're able to get through. And we're going to hear on some of those as well. One of the things I just want to touch on briefly, just an add-on to what Senator Looney said about our state budget, was the fact that we're able to continue to adhere to the state education and cost-sharing formula. Over 2 years ago, in the bipartisan budget, we had worked very hard to establish a new education cost-sharing formula that would phase in grants for a number of towns over 10 years and have some predictability for some of the other towns that had lost school population. And it's very difficult sometimes in this building to be able to adhere to formulas and policies, especially when we have new legislatures. But we were very, very, at the time when we first passed it, we were very committed to staying on track on that formula. And this budget does the same thing. It continues to adhere to that formula, which is extremely important, taking into consideration poverty, concentrated poverty, ELL, and other measures that will help and make sure we invest in our urban areas, but not hurt towns that are losing population, but we give them the predictability that they need over the years. So, but again, I want to thank everybody who's here, my colleagues who are here, my colleagues who are not here, who have worked very, very hard over this legislative session, gotten a number of things accomplished, met the goals that we set out back in January, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of rest after this, and can take comfort in the fact that they have moved our state forward and made life a little bit better for the people of the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. Senator Duff said we were really blessed this year by an extraordinary group of new senators who came in. In fact, half of our caucus, 11 of the 22, are in their first term, and as probably you all know, it is more challenging for a first-term senator to come in, frankly, than it is for a first-term representative because of our joint committee structure. Every majority party senator is chair of a committee and in charge of a major policy area, and there is no time for the kind of apprenticeship that can occur with the rank-and-file House members working their way up. So you're in the middle of a fast-flowing stream from the day you enter the state Senate, and all 11 of our first-term senators did a superb job. It was the largest group of new senators, I think, that came in since 1993, when I was in my first term in the Senate after serving in the House. So one of the first-term senators who was involved in some of that key legislation, and some really the landmark legislation, was a person who, while new to the General Assembly, is certainly not new to labor advocacy and advocacy on behalf of working people, and that is the Senate Chair of the Labor and Public Employees Committee, Senator Julie Kushner, who will talk about the minimum wage and the paid family and medical leave bill. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Marty.
I have to say that for being a long session, it was surprisingly short. It's amazing. You have no idea how quickly the time goes by and how much work there is to get done. And as Senator Looney said, I came from labor, so it was a great honor for me to be in a position to lead on two bills that were so important to our state and so important to working families. And of course, that's the minimum wage and the paid family and medical leave. I know a lot of you have followed these stories, so you know that we are fortunate to be in a position where workers will see their minimum wage go to $15 over the next 4.5 years, with the first increase of $11 hitting, coming in October 1 of this year, and then going to $15 by June 1st of 2023. And as Senator Looney said, it is indexed so that in the future, there will be increases as the economy picks up and moves forward, and we see wages rise all over the country. People here in Connecticut will be able to see their wages go up too in terms of the minimum wage. So that was very exciting, and I think we're leading in the states to accomplish this with indexing and something very important to our working families. And then to sort of match that up with one of the most important things that happens in a working family is the birth of a child or the taking care of a family member who gets ill, whether that's your child or your brother or your sister or your parent. And we were in a position this year to pass the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, which will start with deductions from payroll starting in 2021, January 1st, where it'll be 0.5%. And by including all the workers in the state, we're able to produce a very significant benefit so that there will be wage replacement starting in 2022. And workers who need this benefit to survive during a family illness will get up to $900 a week. It is tilted toward the low wage worker to get a higher percentage of their income replaced, and that was a very conscious decision because we know working families where the wages are lower struggle more to deal with the crises of illness. So together, these are a tremendous package of benefits, and I have to say it took incredible leadership from our president of our Senate and our majority leader. I was fortunate to work hand in hand with the House leadership, our co-chair Robin Porter on labor, and it was a tremendous amount of work. These were not easy bills to craft. They're particularly paid family and medical leave. There are a lot of elements to this that we had to take into consideration. We were responsive to the advocates that have been working so hard to establish these two bills over many, many years. And at the same time, we were responsive to both small businesses and large businesses that had concerns about how we would implement these major changes here in Connecticut. And I think we found a great balance, and that people are going to be very happy at how successful these programs will be. So I was honored to be part of that team that worked so hard to get this done, and really appreciated the support of all of our colleagues in the Senate.
Thanks, Julie. And next we will we'll hear from Senator Christine Cohen, who was a champion of so much significant environmental legislation this session, but also a particular interest to her and to our caucus with the gun safety bills that were passed this year. Obviously, Ethan's Law resulted from an event that happened in her district, and she will talk about the three significant gun-related bills that we passed this year, and I think it was the most significant gun regulation legislation that we passed since the 2013 enactment of the far-reaching legislation that passed in the wake of the Sandy Hook tragedy. Senator Cohen.
Thank you, Senator Looney, and good afternoon. So I'm so thrilled with the passage of so much great legislation, and it is not lost on me the historic significance of this gun safety legislation that passed this session. Certainly having not one but three gun safety bills is quite frankly unheard of, and a real victory. I think folks heard loud and clear the cry of Connecticut residents saying enough is enough, and we absolutely need to do something. So we did indeed pass three great pieces of legislation. One, banning ghost guns, those guns without serial numbers and identification and registration of the same. So that's incredibly significant and of great importance. Also, the safe storage of guns in a motor vehicle, very important. But as Senator Looney alluded to, of significant importance to me is Ethan's Law. Ethan's Law came about, as many of you know, as a result of the death of a 15-year-old boy in my hometown of Guilford, Connecticut, and it was a tragic event, and so the passage of Ethan's Law is bittersweet. But I'm thrilled that it will certainly keep families safe in the future and hold folks accountable for how they store their guns in their homes with minors in those homes. So we certainly could not have done this without the advocacy of Connecticut Against Gun Violence, Moms Demand Action, and our leadership in the Senate here, who have long been gun safety advocates, and certainly within the House caucus as well. In particular, on Ethan's Law, Representative Sean Scanlon, who I have worked very closely with, both of us great friends of the songs before and after this tragic event, have worked with the songs, who have certainly, we've all witnessed, worked tirelessly to ensure that Ethan's Law came to fruition here at the state level, and now are working very diligently at the federal level to ensure some change and passage there as well. So thanks to all who were out there advocating and fighting. As a result, Connecticut is a safer place.
Thanks, Senator Cohen. Also, another significant issue that we passed this year was the Tobacco 21 bill to raise the age for legal access to tobacco from 18 to 21, because we all know that many people who become lifetime smokers and lifetime plagued by health problems start smoking in those early years. The people who make it into their 20s without ever smoking have a much lower percentage of actually starting to smoke at that point. So to speak about that is someone whose own daily experience in his profession sees exactly what the cost of smoking is in our state, and that is Senator Saad Anwar, who joined us in a special election, but made up for lost time by making a significant impact on the session as one of our new members. So, Dr. Senator Anwar.
Thank you, Senator Looney. 95% of all people who smoke started to smoke before the age of 21. And if you look at the numbers, the cumulative effect of the exposure actually adds up the risk of cancer and emphysema and essentially cardiac disease and multiple other illnesses. So this bill has allowed us to reduce the probability of people getting addicted. So as people get older, after the age of 21, if somebody starts to pick up tobacco, their likelihood of addiction is less than that from the age of 18. The other thing is that during high school, when you have some of the other kids who are 18 and the other ones who are not yet 18, they start to share the cigarettes with each other, and that's where the risk starts to increase. So this is going to actually reduce that likelihood, because the 21 age is going to hopefully reduce the number of students who are in high school who are going to be picking up tobacco and vaping products, and then subsequently sharing it with younger friends or family members or peers. That actually is going to truly save lives. This bill is important because we will see the impact. Our average lifespan in the United States has been decreasing. Where other parts of the world it's been increasing, people are living longer and healthier, we are actually, for a variety of reasons, are living less longer. This is one piece of that puzzle, and this is hopefully we should be able to reduce that, and I'm very excited. While I'm speaking about it, this was an effort by a lot of people who put their heart and soul in it, from our representatives as well as from Senate. From the Senate, Senator Flexer has been instrumental. Representative Kristen McCarthy-Vahey has been instrumental, and the chairs of the House for the Committee for Public Health, Senator Abrams and Senator Steinberg, were very instrumental in this effort as well. So I'm honored to have joined them to be able to achieve this. And I just want to add, my peers in the Senate, this is my first session. I am working with some amazing individuals. It's almost, you cannot talk good enough things about the people. They are just friends who are actually supporting each other and are full of knowledge about their areas, which actually is empowering us to be able to achieve success. So thank you again.
Thank you, Senator. And another major issue of the session was the passage of debt-free college, something that we know is of grave concern to many families. You know, the amount of student debt in Connecticut and throughout the country has become oppressively high. We know of many instances where people still burdened with their own student debt now have children who are ready to go off to college and are going to be assuming student debt. So one of the leaders on that issue is someone who also, while a first-term senator, certainly not new to the legislature, Senator Matt Lesser had a very distinguished career in the House of Representatives before coming to the Senate, and is certainly somebody who is expert in our process and provided leadership on so many issues as the Senate Chair of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee this year. Senator Lesser.
Thank you, Senator Looney, and thank you, Senator Duff. I think, having been in the building for a while, this has been the most productive legislative session that I can remember, and it's thanks to the leadership that we have in the Senate that I think we can attribute a lot of that success, as well as to my colleagues, many of whom you've heard from today. And I'm also grateful for Senator Anwar, in part because I have a slight cold, and I'm hoping he'll prescribe me something to take care of it. As Senator Looney mentioned, one of the issues that I've been focused on a long time is the issue of student debt, which is impacting all sorts of things across our economy. You know, it's over $1.4 trillion in this country right now. Connecticut, a few years ago, passed the first in the nation Student Loan Bill of Rights. But this year, under the leadership of our new colleague, Senator Haskell, we moved one step further, and we addressed the issue of student debt by providing a low-cost, debt-free option for students in the state to attend community colleges. And I want to talk about why that's so critical, so important. One, we've seen an impact on entrepreneurship of student debt. You cannot afford to start a new business. You cannot afford to take that risk if you have to make those loan payments every month. People are starting families later in life because they can't, because of the burden of student debt, they can't afford to start a family. And if you talk to the Connecticut Association of Realtors, it's affecting the whole housing market in the state of Connecticut. It actually delays by as much as 7 years the time by which people purchase their first home. So it has a systemic influence on the economy. And Connecticut is more burdened by student debt than other states. On average, I think we have about $36,000 a year burdening graduates. Now, community college is the big untold secret out there, because it is the last best bargain in higher education. It is already free for many people in our state. But what the state of Connecticut just did this year is set a message that we're going to make it simple, not just free, but simple. And by guaranteeing debt freedom for every single person who's able to attend a community college in the state of Connecticut, I think we're going to send a message that people don't have to make a trade-off between going in deeper and deeper into debt and being able to get the job skills you need to succeed in the 21st century economy. So I think this is a real success. My congratulations to Senator Haskell and to Representative Haddad for leading on this issue this session. I think it's not gotten enough attention, but it's going to make a real big influence. And we're joining neighboring states. Rhode Island and New York have already made a similar commitment to higher education. So it's one of the big accomplishments of this session, and I'm thrilled to support it.
Thank you, Senator. Along with Senators Kushner and Cohen and Anwar and Lesser, who are all brand new to the state Senate and made an extraordinary impact this time. Our next speaker is someone who came into the Senate and assumed the chairmanship of one of the most technically complex and demanding committees of all, one that has its own specialty vocabulary and sort of intricacies that it normally takes a long time to achieve a learning curve to deal with them. But fortunately, we had somebody who came in with significant knowledge in the area and the capacity to master subjects very quickly, and that is Senator Norm Needleman, Chair of our Energy and Public Utilities Committee.
I think I have about 25% of the acronyms down pat now. So I would like to say, first of all, that everything we did this session comes as a result of the great leadership we had from Senator Looney and Senator Duff. But I also want to thank Senator Austin and Senator Fanfaro for their great leadership on the budget, which was delivered on time, which does a great job of providing for things that are essential to the state. As far as my committee goes, the work on the Energy Committee was taxing and stressful, but I think the end result was a great jobs bill, a new industry for Connecticut that we have never had, a revitalization of southeastern Connecticut, and basically the replacement of the energy that Millstone produces with carbon-free green energy, 2,000 megawatts over the next 10 years, which is about where we predict the lifespan of Millstone will sort of phase itself out. We also did a big 5G bill, which will allow for placement of high-speed internet on state properties, which we've never had before. And the green economy bill does a whole bunch of things, including fixes the virtual net metering and net metering things that were passed in SB 9 last time. So I have to thank my co-chair, Dave Arconte, for his great leadership on this committee. He was very patient and tolerant with me as I tried to come up to speed. And for all of the senators who I've served with, it's actually, from our point of view, we're all new, we're running around. From the leadership's point of view, they had to be sitting there saying, I can't believe I have 11 new senators that I have to figure out how to deal with one at a time. and great patience and a great job that I think that the proof is in the pudding. We did a great job for the state of Connecticut. We're moving our economy forward. We're taking care of those most in need. We're making sure that, that the workers of the state of Connecticut are treated fairly, all things that are critically important, as well as creating opportunity for the future. So with that, I want to say thank you to both of you and all of my colleagues. Why do I always go clean up? I don't understand that.
You drive in the most runs that way. That's how it happens. And one other thing I just wanted to mention, while so much of what we that gets publicity in the state is usually the partisan differences, but there was one area where we had a significant amount of bipartisanship once again, and that was in some consumer-related health insurance protection areas that Senator Lesser and I worked closely on with Senator Fasano. And that became Senate Bill 42 that passed the Senate, and then the language of that was incorporated into the budget bill. And I just want to remind you briefly of the components of that. One part just banned behavior by insurers to overcharge patients by using contracts with third-party vendors. A very important component also adding laboratory services to surprise billing protections. We passed an act concerning surprise billing a couple of years ago, but found out that lab tests had to be covered and designated separately. Another important section, we shortened the amount of time that insurers have to respond to urgent care requests. Currently, that's 72 hours in the bill. It will be reduced to 48, except on weekends when it will remain 72, and that's often crucial to a patient who needs to get a determination made quickly. We also have a provision that bans discretionary clauses in disability insurance contracts, where it is the insurance company itself that devises the language and should not be given the presumption of the ability to interpret that language. We also have a requirement that hospitals will now have to report trauma activation fee amounts to the Office of Health Strategy, and that's an area that's currently unregulated. Some hospitals charge trauma activation fees when the trauma unit has to be assembled when the call comes in. And there's right now unfettered discretion in that, when to charge a trauma fee, how much to charge. So we are going to require hospitals to report trauma activation fee amounts and see whether further legislation is necessary once we know about that pattern. We also had a provision, a very significant one, that ensures insurance coverage for emergency room care that meets the prudent layperson standard. So if someone in good faith believes he may be having a heart attack, but it turns out to be a gastric attack of one kind, not as urgent, as long as the action of the patient in going to the emergency department meets the prudent layperson standard, it will be required to be covered. And there are some cases of insurers choosing not to cover it under those circumstances. And finally, creating a task force to make recommendations regarding high deductible health plans. So all of that began as 6 or 7 different bills, were all combined into Senate Bill 42. and then became part of the budget bill, and consider that a significant achievement also. Finally, before taking questions, would like to ask our chair of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Kathy Austin, who was the bulwark all the way through from January 9th until the passage of the budget. Her workload was just unfathomable for many. And in addition, the night after the session ended, I happened to call her, and she was immersed in a budget meeting in her town, where she's, of course, the first select woman. So it was like going from macro to micro overnight, and she is adept at both and all. So just a few words from our champion on the appropriation side, who carried such a burden throughout the entire session, Senator Kathy Austin.
Thank you very much, Marty and Bob, for helping out in every area over the last session, and for all my colleagues who found out quickly that to support their legislation that they were doing, we had to incorporate it into the budget in many pieces and parts to make sure that we were able to sustain a program. As you know, good policy is easy to make. We just had to make it sustainable too. And in all cases, the work that they were doing allowed us to incorporate those processes into the budget. We passed the budget. I think this is the first time in more than 6 years that we passed the budget on time before the session ended. I was really happy to see that happen. I was also very happy to work with Senator Fonfara on the finance portion to make sure that we were supporting the expenses side of the budget, which I happen to be working on. And I was also happy that the budget included many of the bipartisan efforts that were included in the budget that we worked on last year. So the goal was to make sure that we were honoring the commitments that we had made in the last 2 years, keep it moving forward, and support the policies that my colleagues were very interested in seeing happen. Two other pieces of legislation that I think were very important, and that was the post-traumatic stress bill that covered first responders on police and firefighters. I would say again, I can't wait until we have post-traumatic stress covered for all workers, no matter their job class. I think that that's vitally important. And I was talking to the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture the other day, and the bill that we passed earlier that was passed in the House and the Senate and signed by the governor already is production of hemp, and we're up to more than 172 applications. With the first farm that was permitted is in a town that I represent in Ledyard. This will be a true game changer for our farmers here in Connecticut. It's 172 applications in less than a month and a half after the legislation passed and was signed up by the governor. I foresee us getting up to around 500 farms. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marty.
Okay, we will open it up for questions now.
Senator, thank you for your presentation, but I wonder if I could change the subject and get your reaction to this merger with Raytheon and UTC. And do you think there could have been anything in the budget of a pro-business nature that might have kept them from deciding to put their headquarters in Waltham?
Absolutely not. I think this is obviously a decision that was probably in the works for a while, and certainly we regret the loss of the 100 executive jobs that will be moving to Boston. But overall, I think now with the creation of Raytheon and UTC as a unity, this will be even a much stronger company, dominant in its market, assuming it gets the approvals necessary under antitrust laws, and I think will provide even greater stability for the 19,000 production jobs that are here in Connecticut, plus the untold number of others, jobs in the supply chain that Connecticut depends on heavily. So while the loss of the headquarters is significant primarily as a loss of philanthropy and charitable giving, perhaps from those wealthy people, but overall I think the impact will not be that extreme in Connecticut. And also I think it's important to keep in mind that in moving to headquarters, Raytheon is already headquartered in Massachusetts in Waltham. I believe the new headquarters is going to be in Boston. Again, it's another example of the fact that Connecticut really has a challenge in that none of our cities are really large enough to be considered the kind of magnet that Boston is. And it's a challenge, but we have the capacity. I think in each of our major cities is developing niches of its own. I think New Haven with the research being spun off from Yale University, Hartford with its resources, Bridgeport being close to New York, and the like. We have ways to compete, but I think it's unfair in some ways to compare the attractions of Boston to what we have in Connecticut. It's like asking why, if you have two athletes of equal, two basketball players of equal athleticism, to ask why the 6'9" player regularly out rebounds the 6'4" player. It's a matter of size.
But with regard to all of the tax breaks that UTC has received, aren't there a number of strings attached to those that would require them to retain the jobs here, or can they simply just buy their way out should they decide to move the Middletown plant or the East Hartford plant?
Well, from what I understand, they have shown no intention to move those plants, and obviously they have commitments that were made during the Malloy administration to retain those jobs here in exchange for the commitments that were made then. But I think that UTC, Raytheon, will continue to be a very strong presence in terms of employment in the state of Connecticut.
So you think it's just basically a bad PR blackout?
Well, I think it's obviously the Republicans, I assume, are going to say the sky is falling, just as they did with GE. And we all know that GE, the decision-making behind that, turned out to really have nothing to do with the state's economy, and had more to do with the fact that suburban leafy corporate campuses were going out of fashion. And we had the president of GE at the time said he wanted to be in a location where he didn't need to see a deer out the window when he looked out of his office, but would prefer to see a young, creative entrepreneur who might be working in a loft business across the street, who might walk into his office with an idea that could be beneficial to the company. So I think it's a matter of Boston being a magnet of all kinds. Frankly, I think if we were looking at a move to Springfield, Worcester, or Chicopee, we would have more reason to be concerned or to be self-reflective. But I think Senator Duff has actually a significant amount of information here on relocations that have gone the other way. Bob?
Thank you. See that? Good afternoon again, everybody. So just on that as well, is that one is that we've never, I haven't aware of any conversations that have happened to us anyway on this issue before the news broke yesterday. Two, they've never mentioned anything negative about the state of Connecticut. This is a business making a business decision. They've never said anything negative about the state. Three, I'll take our 19,000 jobs over those 100 jobs any day of the week. But we will respect, obviously, what they're doing and hope that one day they'll return back to the Farmington campus because we do respect the work that they do. But let me just mention a few companies that just remind people that have come to the state of Connecticut. Back in 2011, Cigna moved its headquarters from Philadelphia to Bloomfield. October of 2012, Charter Communications moved its headquarters from St. Louis to Stamford. Now they're actually building their own building and a second building on top of that. April 2003, NBC Sports moved its headquarters from New York City to Stamford. And these, by the way, these companies keep adding jobs as we go. We've had smaller companies as well, like Magnetic Technologies of Oxford. Putnam has come back as well. Magnetic Technologies of Oxford, Mass. relocated to Putnam, building its headquarters and hiring 40 people. Ideanomics, based in New York City and Beijing, moved its headquarters from West Hartford, adding 300 jobs. Infosys is coming in. And we also have HomeServe in Norwalk that has moved as well from Florida to Norwalk. And I can go on and on and on with the examples of companies that have come into Connecticut. So I believe that there's a story to tell. And again, this merger that came yesterday, or was announced yesterday and moving, they did not take any kind of negative shots at the state of Connecticut. In fact, I think they've made a business decision based on what's best for their business. But we still have, let's not forget that we still have 19,000 jobs, as Senator Looney said, here in the state of Connecticut that are good manufacturing jobs. We value those jobs, we value the companies, and we'll continue to work in partnership with them to grow those jobs here in the state.
Well, Bob, those 100 jobs are probably among the highest salary jobs in the state of Connecticut.
I'm not minimizing that at all, but again, the business has made a decision. But I think sometimes when it's reported that a company is moving its headquarters to another place, that it seems like every single one of those jobs are going. and when in fact we have the 19,000 jobs here in the state. And let's not forget that Sikorsky, Pratt & Whitney, and others have made significant commitments to the state of Connecticut and are growing by leaps and bounds. And
The
that's
19,000 includes this carrier and Otis, and those are being spun off. We knew about that 6 months ago.
Mhm.
So those are going to somebody else. And they may not stay here.
What's that last part you said?
They may not stay here.
Well, look, we compete every single day for businesses and jobs here, but we know for a fact that we have the most highly educated, most productive workforce in the nation. This is a great place to do business. We passed a lot of good legislation. We have a balanced budget. We're doing things in the state of Connecticut that's going to attract millennials. We invested highly at UConn in our higher education. We're doing debt-free college. We're doing paid family medical leave. Those are all things that millennials and others here look at as to what is our quality of life going to be, what's the balance between work and their lives going to be as well. So all these things matter. But again, we have the most highly educated, most highly productive workforce in the nation. We have the most Fortune 500 companies here in the state per capita than any other state. We'll continue to compete for those jobs and those headquarters every single day.
Two of the three things you bragged about,